He goes on to say in the beginning of the chapter that the chapter will argue that biblical studies and theology must join forces with a classical view of first philosophy. Sadly, today, neither scientists nor theologians know very much of philosophy. As a result, their view and conclusions are often shallow and prematurely formed. The purpose of recovering this first philosophy is so that we can, one, gain a broader and deeper view of reality than scientism can provide, and two, have an appropriate intellectual vantage point from which to provide persuasive criticism of scientism and science itself, at least when it was drawn faulty conclusions by disregarding the philosophical and theological components of the topic. And far be it for me to continue the bandwagon of saying the degradation of society, but as far as the classical view of education, that work should have all been done in the primary schools. Yeah. And really the philosophical underpinnings of science, the specialization is what you went to the universities, the early universities for. Those established by the intelligentsia of Christianity and the West. And so the philosophical underpinnings seem to be unmatured because all we have done, especially since the 50s, is specialization. And so that's something hopefully that will be corrected in the near future. And I'm trying with at least my two kids. So the rest of you get on it. So
all right. So notice what he says here. First philosophy does two things for us, right? It helps us to gain a broader and deeper view of reality. Notice, than scientism can provide. So first philosophy gives us some insight into reality that scientism can't give us. And secondly, that, it provides a persuasive criticism of scientism and of science itself, at least when it draws faulty conclusions. So those are two things that, first philosophy can give us there. And of course, the folks who hold to scientism are going to reject this because they believe that science, is the end all and be all. And so that's what the first thing he talks about in this section of the chapter, the war against first philosophy, right? So, man, batten the hatches and man your side. He says, what exactly is first philosophy first? So what is it? And he says, roughly, first philosophy is the notion that there's a realm of rational investigation. There's a realm of rational investigation that, one, is the proper domain of philosophy, two, is independent of, indeed more basic or fundamental than science, right? That is, science is built upon the foundation of the results of first philosophy. And then thirdly, it gives us knowledge of the topic studied in that realm, including knowledge of reality. So first philosophy is a particular realm of rational investigation. Well, I thought we only investigated for science. No. He tells us first philosophy allows us to investigate as well, right? It's the proper domain of philosophy. First philosophy is obviously, given the name, it's independent of science, right? And it gives us knowledge of reality that are not part of what we can't learn from science. So those are the things. So why, if that's the case, why are folks at war with first philosophy?
Yeah, exactly. It takes the dollars away from them. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, he goes on to say that philosopher George Beeler, an advocate of first philosophy, has unpacked first philosophy into the following two theses. The first he calls the autonomy of philosophy, areas of philosophical investigations that lie completely outside competence of science. Right, so you can't put it into the natural sciences. It falls so far outside that it's its own thing. Debates about abstract objects, like whether or not there are numbers, sets, and so forth, that exist outside space and time, right? There's your forms, again, an area where you study it in philosophy class, not in science class. The second thesis he calls the authority of philosophy, areas which science and philosophy both investigate where the philosophical factors carry more weight than and trump those of science. The question of whether unobservable theoretical entities of science exist, like electrons, are merely useful fictions, or the nature of time.
Right. So those are two things here that Beeler has noted here. The autonomy of philosophy, there are things that it talks about that are outside, and so it's more independent than science. And the authority of philosophy, there are things that philosophy can speak authoritative of that science cannot speak of, right? So those are two of the kind of issues with regard to first philosophy. And so it tells us what happens then when we reject first philosophy. Well, the replacement of first philosophy with science, right? In other words, right? The emergence of scientism has radically altered the default worldview of the West, replacing Christian theism with naturalistic materialism. So, first, worldview alteration is the first result of reading first philosophy. Even though it has all of these benefits, we reject, if we replace it, we reject a particular worldview. Secondly, he tells us, besides having an impact on changing the major worldview in the West, the rejection of first philosophy has changed many, in fact, he says maybe most philosophers' conception of what philosophy is all about. It goes without saying, he tells that for over 2,500 years, philosophers took themselves to be providing truth and knowledge of reality, knowing, values, and so forth, but they no longer do.
Right. It's really hard. So if we just don't do it, then all we have to do is just our science experiments, and then we're good. We don't have to do so much.